Hello and good morning. We are back. Yes, David, Parry, and I, we are back on the airwaves. And as I'm looking out of our back window into the garden, the sun's actually shining. Wow. Well, I think it's the sun. I don't think it's a spotlight. I think it is the sun. Good morning, David. I hope life is well in the Isle of Bute.
Morning, Alan. For some reason, the sound suddenly went down. Hang on. Right, I think that's a bit better. Yeah, no, well, it's
Right.
always idyllic here, apart from the people that come over bringing their mainland phobias with them. That's not
Oh,
just
dear.
me. All the locals think the same thing. They come across and they act as though they're still on the psychotic mainland. And I'm getting sick of it, and the locals are sick of it already. But it's Sunday morning, the sun is shining. There's a bit of a mist in the distance, but it'll pass in an hour or so. Yes, could be a lot worse. Must count our blessings.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a very strange time of year, isn't it? I mean, as far as the meteorological people are concerned, we're in spring. We're not for another 3 weeks, are we? But they, they like it to be, how can you put it, organised, so you've got 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. Uh, but it's like us humans adapt things to suit ourselves, but it doesn't always say that it's right. But
Oh, I think it's another example of modern delusion. Everything's got to work around what we want. And yeah, I'm getting actually quite sick of it. Aren't we all meant to be looking for a greater harmony with nature nowadays? It's called ecology. As opposed to putting our fantasies onto nature. Yeah, the spring is a couple of weeks away. Yeah, eat it, live with it, grow up. It's the same attitude of the people coming over here in their cars at the weekend. In the middle of the night on an empty road last night, someone was tooting their horn to get people out of the way. What people? Who? There's nobody there. That's what you're used to doing on the mainland. Don't do it here. I think there's so much delusion in modern life. It's beginning to get worrying, and of course, it's having genuine political effects. What the reality is of the various war scenarios going on around us isn't even being reported now. What they're doing is reporting fantasy Hollywood scenarios of what they want to be the case, but it's easy to find out what the reality is. I don't know. I think the Western world is in a state of collapse at the moment, and if we truly value not only our relationship with the environment around us, and if we don't value that, then there's nothing. You know, we won't even be able to survive for the betterment of our children and grandchildren. I don't know what's going on, but I know it's wicked and ridiculous. What do you think, Alan? I hope I'm still online. Hello. I think it might be just me at the moment, so I want to make a declaration. Um, the madness around us all is something to do with the ensuing darkness. Has anybody noticed, if anyone is listening to this, nobody talks about white magic and white witches anymore. It's all dark, dark magic, dark this, dark that. Do people think there are no consequences to all of this? I mean, I notice I'm not a great fan of Lovecraft. Um, I because I don't know, the horror genre is a fantasy genre, of course, mostly, and it has a place in literature. And as those people, those who know me know my other great religion is literature. Yeah, I'm no great fan of his. I think there's a great deal of hype in his work. The imagination, it's fantasy. It's not really imagination; it's fantasy. But I notice even there, no one wants to talk about the elder gods. They expelled those terrible things at the beginning of time. As far as I remember, the so-called mythos, of course, it's not a mythos. That word actually means certain things. It's as a series of fantasy scenarios. It's not a mythos. But I notice what's references to the elder gods and what these terrible entities describe them as. I think it's the laws of pain. All of that's being swept under the carpet for these terrible monstrosities. And I don't know why. Why is this the glorification of the dark? And of course, what it actually is a realization of entropy creeping into Western civilization and the complete lack of wishing any type of renewal on the part of the ruling elites who just want to keep things as they are because they're doing nicely, thank you. Which, of course, isn't what the natural order does. It's time for a change and it's time to move on. I don't know if anybody heard that, but I'm pleased to say it this morning. What else should I do? Are you there at all, Helen? I'll try to get hold of him if anybody's listening.
Hello, David. Hello.
Hi, Alan, you're back. Hello,
Hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. It went completely off the internet. Sorry, folks. It's where I live. We haven't got ultra fast broadband. In fact, there's a guy who stands in the corner with a wheel keeping it going, I think. Oh, dear me. Anyway, I'm here. For how long, we don't know, David.
Well, such is life, as they say.
It is. It wouldn't be our show, would it, without something like this happening?
No, no, there's
So,
a certain truth there.
right. Yeah, as we're saying, there's something about us human beings like things to be in order.
Well, I had a good rant about Western civilization while you were off air.
Did
Um,
you? All right, okay.
um, so yeah, I mean, but again, it's for me that's part of the fantasy of modern life. America, get an education, grow up. I keep looking at the age range of the people doing all these pranks on TikTok and the other social media. Some of them are going bald. Don't you think it's time you lot grew up? Yeah, and the skateboarders and the rest of it. You're all in your bath chairs. I mean, I just think it's a real sign of the fantasy levels. I am not against fantasy. It has a real place in life, and certainly the part of me that's interested in psychology is very aware that it plays an important function in psychological health. There are real reasons why it's there, but it's not meant to be put above absolutely everything else. And it's a part of, not an instead of. And yeah, I just think it's bewildering. Everything's going to fit nice and neatly, even though it doesn't, and we're going to live our lives regardless. So, what do you
I,
think, Helen?
yeah, I agree. I'll tell you what makes me kind of smile in some kind of contemptuous way is that if you're watching television and the adverts come on, and of course, they're trying to sell a product. Everybody's got smiley faces, and isn't life absolutely wonderful if you buy this product? And we all live in this total utopia world. Yeah, it's and the problem is a lot of people actually buy into it and believe it, don't they?
Yeah, well, I see there is something more sinister than you, but I'm the suspicious one. You're the saint and I'm the Greavesy. Um, so yeah, I see gross political manipulation at work there.
Yeah,
This
I
is what
agree.
we're like, isn't it? Wonderful compared to everybody else. I think people need to travel more, and they realise in some ways we've got a lot of catching up to do. There's something very great in Britain, but we'll be losing that shortly if we don't come
Yes,
to reality and see what's going on around us. As I said off air a minute ago, well, you were off air. You know, the rich, the elites. I mean, I don't even think it's the rich. I think it's these corporations that will do anything, do and say anything, including destroy the world if necessary, because they're that arrogant. All because they want to
yes,
put
I
more
think you're
value
right.
in shareholders' hands. I mean, come off it. They will do anything and say anything to maintain their position. And I think until we start seeing through that, that is not our history. We're a parliamentary monarchy. We've got, and people know I'm against all of that. But the point is, that's not our history. And the aristocracy in Britain have gone out of their way to accommodate their people. It was always a one nation, we're all in this together sort of thing. That's missing at the moment. And I think that, and that's why they're using these very subtle psychological tactics because they don't want to go to the next stage, which of course isn't subtle and coercive. What do you think, Alan?
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, considering our nation in history is supposed to be, shall we say, one of the forerunners of so-called democracy and free speech, I know we've got probably a lot more free speech than certain countries in this world, but at the moment, everything seems to be done to erode um, us even being able to think what we want to think. I think it's very dangerous, actually. Um,
Well, I mean, the word is slavery. Um, I mean, always in two minds about George Galloway. The reaction of the establishment to him winning, he's a freely elected MP. And you've
yes.
got the media going in there, although he's somehow taken over. It was called an election. And he's somehow muscled his way in. There's a returning officer of unimpeachable local reputation. They know nothing about. They do, of course. They know nothing about our electoral system. Other parties, if they don't think the right count has been made, can insist the whole counting is done again, and they can do that until they're satisfied. There are no boxes of votes left inside cupboards. That's fantasy again, because these things are hotly contested, and the other parties can basically insist and insist until there's no way out of a particular truth. And Rishi Sunak, that deplorable human being, is going around making threatening speeches the minute George Galloway is elected. He's been elected in a free election, whether you like it or not. These are dangerous signs, Dylan, and we really have to wake up to them. What do you think?
Yeah. Also, there's a similar kind of thing went on with the politics in Northern Ireland with Sinn Féin, and now it's amazing now that they've kind of been accepted into the mainstream, having a Sinn Féin uh, leader now accepted as part of the British electoral system, where there was arch enemies not that long ago. We're just full of hypocrisy in all manner of ways in this country.
Well, I mean, a lot of it, I don't think you'll agree with what I'm just about to say. A lot of it stems from Boris Johnson. and that new type of conservatism. To be honest with anyone who's listening, I've always had a soft spot for traditional Tories. That was the landed gentry, and they had a sense of responsibility. I don't agree with them, and I don't agree that in the modern world that's the way we conduct our affairs. But they weren't just these accountants and half-assed businessmen trying to make a quick buck at everybody else's expense. They believed that God had placed them in that position and they had responsibilities to the people around them. And that was a unique British development. I mean, that wasn't on the continent. There was nothing like it in Germany as a comparative. There was nothing like it in France. And it has been said that those are some of the reasons, that is one of the reasons that there's never been a terrible. I mean, there was a civil war here. There have been a couple actually, but there was never a civil war in the sense that the French had it, because the French aristocracy simply wouldn't listen to the ordinary people, no matter what it said. Hence, it explodes sooner or later. Whereas the British aristocracy, the English aristocracy, did listen because they felt it was good for the whole of us. We were working as an entity, as a national entity, as an individual series of entities collaborating together. And that I can understand. As I say, I don't agree with it, but I can understand it, and that makes some sort of sense to me. But these new Tories, my God, they want to govern. Hang on, we don't live in a third world banana republic. You don't do that sort of thing here. And they want to tell people what to do. Politicians come and go. There are things called elections. You're not in a position in our system to start dictating, because we know where that leads to. And that awful man still won't admit he's in the wrong. He lied all the way through the pandemic openly. He admits now he lied to his own party as well as Parliament, but he's still right. No, you're a fat liar and you're a disgrace to this country. And you're one of the people that ushered in this new type of hypocrisy. You probably won't agree with a word of that, but what do you think, Alan?
No, that's where you're wrong. I do agree with you. As you know, I've always erred towards the side of the Conservative Party. But to be honest with you, at the moment, I'm totally disillusioned with them. I feel ashamed that I put my trust in them. I but the problem I see it at the moment is that, yeah, okay, the Labour Party have got a 20% lead in the polls. Not saying it'll end up like that, but I can't actually say I got faith in them either. I really don't know what's going on in British politics at the moment, and I do fear for our country. I do, and I must admit, Boris Johnson did an incredible job of pulling the wool over all our eyes, well, majority of our eyes. I totally accept what you're saying, David.
He,
Um,
he didn't pull the wool over my eyes.
that's fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, I think we're going through. We should be having a rude awakening. We should be waking up to what's going on. It's. I do think we're living in very dangerous times. To be fair, I do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that was well said, Alan. If we care about our families, I mean, doesn't anybody love anybody anymore? If we care about our families and we care about the environment, there's a lot said about that, but not enough done. It really is time to wake up a bit and see what's going on. I mean, Rishi Sunak is the result of all of this. Yet another unelected prime minister. Liz Truss who nearly bankrupted the country, and in weeks. I mean, that took some doing. My God,
Gas,
you've got to get the Bank of England itself stepping in case we're all bankrupt. For heaven's sake!
unbelievable. In what was it? 7 weeks was it?
Yeah, it was like
Oh,
7 weeks, and we nearly are the third world thanks to her. And apparently, she doesn't think she was in the wrong.
no,
I mean, what
actually,
is?
fun. She went to America the other week, didn't she?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
she made a speech, and she still believes that she was right in what she did, and that we should have stayed with her, and everything would have worked out all right. I mean, dear me, talk about an ego.
Well, ego and amnesia. I mean, does she remember what happened? You know, the Bank of England being forced, it never steps in like that, being forced to say, we're saving everything. Why don't you sod off, Liz? Yeah, I mean, she seems to have forgotten what's happened very quickly. There's something delusional, as I say, the modern curse. It was Alice Bailey, a writer I admire a great deal, who said, of course, that these times of delusion were coming, and they'd be increasingly dangerous if we didn't start to see through them. That is happening now. That is happening now.
Yeah,
That's no longer something said prophetically. That is happening now. But you know, we can forget everything if this continues much longer. I mean, people. I think get me wrong. I've no greater faith in Keir Starmer and the Labour people. They forgot the working, ordinary man in the street years ago. They're not interested in that, and they don't really offer a particularly different point of view. Um, my
true.
trouble with the whole system is that it's one group of Oxbridge lawyers against another group of Oxbridge lawyers. You know, I mean, this is wrong. It's just the elite patting itself on the back and pretending to disagree about certain things, and maybe on the odd occasion actually sort of nearly disagreeing about something, but not really. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they don't like Galloway coming back. You know, and how, because he's one of the old style British politicians. You remember them as well as I do, Alan. They had
Yes, indeed.
brains and they had guts and they had integrity. Whatever happened to those things? You know, and they don't like the people of Rochdale have spoken, and it's like that doesn't matter. You know, if people can't see the danger signs all around them, then stop criticizing Russia and stop criticizing China, because we will be worse. What do you think, Alan?
No, I do actually agree. See, you and I have known each other for quite a number of years, and I know that our politics have been totally different. I totally understand that. Um, but the events that have gone on over the last few years has altered my mind completely. Um, if you're asking me what the answer is, I really don't know. To be perfectly truthful, I really don't know what the answer is. I know we're in need of a big shake-up, and we need to go back to some basic standards that this country used to hold itself up to represent. Um, I think in lots of quarters in the world, we're held in contempt now. It used to mean something to have a British passport. I think it's almost a shame to, to show a British passport now. But I can't believe that things will not alter because these type of things they kind of come to a head, and then it's even like fashion in clothes, isn't it? Right? They, like back in the late 60s, early 70s, you got like the mini skirt and all this kind of thing, and then everything alters, and now it's kind of coming back. Um, and then here's a silly example. Um, Going back in 1968, I had a pair of glasses. It was revolutionary. They were called Relactolite, and when you went outside, they came over darker, so it didn't affect your eyes. Right? A couple of years ago, they brought out, they said, a new invention, and they called it transition. It's the same thing, right? It only took them like 40 years to reinvent the wheel, and that's how it seems that our society does. It goes round in massive circles. I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh, I agree, but I don't see that as a mistake. I see that as a business move. Um, you know, the people, you know, I was moaning about the a misuse of the word mythos. I'm just about to misuse it myself. The Star Trek mythos. It's not a mythos, but you know, as a catch-all term, it always depressed me because you can work out who's who if you're looking at the storylines. So the
Yeah.
Klingons are the Russians. You know, they're
Yes.
complete, right, very impressive, but completely irrational, and you can't deal with them. You know, the Borg are basically the Japanese and the Chinese because they're just clones of each other. The people forget in that particular view of life, they end up taking nearly everything over. And it means the British must be the Ferengi, these little men, these little guys with big ears that go around trying to sell everything to everybody. And there was one episode that particularly depressed me. I mean, not that I watched episodes of it, not that I wouldn't. I mean, they're well put together. They're very, very big budget, and you get some stars in that particular series, including, of course, Patrick Stewart nowadays as Captain Picard. I mean, no one says Patrick Stewart, excuse me, can't act. He's an actor, he's a
Yeah,
proper actor. Um, it just depressed me, but six snippets of things as you're channel surfing. The real secret of Roswell was it was a Ferengi ship that actually crashed there. And the minute they crashed, all they're trying to do is get out the wreckage and sell people stuff, which is why it was all hushed up. And I thought, oh my God, that's Britain in the universe.
I'll tell you
You know,
what.
we
I'll tell you why I'm laughing about it. Is that Anne is a fervent fan of anything to do with space, and she's been what to me. I can't say I enjoy it, to be honest, but she's been watching on a Sunday. She always just when we were at home like to watch from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. Deep Space Nine, right? And she's quite upset this morning because I've took it off. And and yes, but I have watched some of it. I've been doing other things, but yeah, I have watched some of it because she was watching this, and yeah, I agree. You can actually see the analogies of different countries in on these beings that have come from different planets. Yes, you can actually see what they're getting at, can't you?
well, it's just us. The depressing thing is, it's just us.
Uh,
Deep Space Nine, that's one of the franchises. Again, I'm not going to be too critical. Some very, very good players, some strong storylines. I wish they'd stop attacking religion. It seems to be sci-fi. Can't resist doing that. Um, right. Let's get paranormal for a minute. Atheist communist Russia. Did they stop talking about the supernatural? No, they didn't. What they wanted to do, they were perfectly aware these things were parts of life, as is modern communist China. They're perfectly aware of it. What they wanted to do in true revolutionary spirit is reframe it. They didn't want the language of the church being the only language that talked about these events, that talked about these phenomena. And therefore, that's where the whole idea of a paranormality, the paranormal actually comes from in the modern world. It was actually Soviet Russia. That was them trying to find a new vocabulary for paranormal events. Actually, they hit something very, very important. As I said, as I was bigging you up on Vivian Pell's show the other night.
thank you,
Um,
thank you.
Always, they actually hit a very important linguistic and philosophical distinction, which I don't think they realised. The supernatural, as I think we might have said on this show before, it must mean something completely outside of our continuum. It cannot be anything within nature, which means, my God, how far does nature stretch? Whereas
Yes,
supernature, the paranormal, para, partly normal, must mean everything that can happen that's unusual inside our continuum. And the Russians thought, well, you'd probably spend the rest of history trying to work that out, let alone getting to anything supernatural. And they were proved right. And of course, that's where the vocabulary of the paranormal comes from. And it saddens me that all of these ghost teams and what have you are completely unaware of that and not wishing to be rude. They could do with reading a few books, most of them. And will argue you out that it's all the same. Actually, it's not, and that was a very important distinction. The paranormal offers a very important way of looking at these phenomena and our position in a much more complicated world than people thought. What do you think, Alan?
yeah, yes. There's a lot of things that goes on this planet of ours that uh, can be explained and at the same time not. be explained. And by that is that somebody can come out with a rational explanation why certain thing has took place, but then another party can give you the totally opposite view, that this was paranormal, this was created by some other force, not by human beings. It's a debate that's gone on for, I don't know, probably gone on for centuries, I suppose, where there's no clear cut line. But then there are times where it is just totally, completely obvious that it's happened beyond the realms of what a human being uh, could do, and it's times like that that amazingly they get shoved under the carpet. The governments don't want anybody to know about that. I find that quite intriguing, David.
Well, you're turning me into revolutionary David again this morning, which doesn't take much doing at the minute.
Right.
I completely agree again. The point that was, the point I was making was, I wish sci-fi would make more room for religion, and people will say, well, that's not in the genre, but even that's not true. It actually is, for the simple reason you're dealing with something very, very different. I had an argument with a UFO boy a year or so ago on the social media, and I couldn't get what he was talking about. What can religion do to, counter all this stuff? And right, there was a photograph of something in the sky. Remember, I've seen a UFO, so I'm not an unbeliever.
Yeah.
And this and that and the other. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, he's completely misunderstood what religion is. Religion is the inner journey. It's the language of psychiatry, the language of spirituality. It's not the language of the physical sciences. It never was. It was never designed to be that. You're going inside. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You're asked to understand these deeper and deeper states of consciousness and subconsciousness and unconsciousness and so on. That's religion. Whereas sci-fi is looking at space. So I can understand that. I can understand the fascination. But to conflate the two or confuse the two is doing a misservice to both. And of course, it is one of the reasons it leads to Alice Bailey's glamour, which is what she called the delusion of the modern world. And I'll give you an example of how things do cross over. I mean, if you read Alice Bailey's books carefully, she's basically paraphrasing massively. So if we get any admirers of Alice Bailey listening to the show, so am I. So please don't jump on me. I'm trying to paraphrase a great deal of material into a short couple of sentences.
Yeah.
She would have said this was some sort of retarded world at the beginning. That life as it was manifesting here was really entropic. It really couldn't make much headway. It couldn't really struggle forward. So a hierarchy from another world. Now she says Venus, and that's not as silly as it sounds, and I'll say why in a minute. Actually, through love, through duty to the greater good, came here. So you have entities, you have a group of entities, a hierarchy of beings and energies coming from another world to visit and position itself on this world to give our evolution a kickstart, to get it going down the right lines at the right speed. Now, that is a magnificent idea. It's not meant to be sci fi, it's not meant to be fantasy, it's meant to be an actuality. And, that so we're looking at the different levels of these things in a way which is very, very modern. Why is that not a silly idea? Did she mean Venus on this level, on the level of the low density, as the New Age people say that we're on? No, she didn't. She meant Venus on a much higher level, a much higher frequency, maybe a Venus of the future. And it's silly to push all this stuff away because if you take a step back, uh, Swedenborg talks about beings from other worlds. Rudolf Steiner talks about beings from other worlds. And what the UFO people will do, and what the Hollywood will do, and what the sci-fi people will do, is suddenly reduce that. So all you're dealing with is a group of short guys and flying saucers. The end.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean anything. But if you remember, these are spiritual stories pointing to metaphysical truths, or maybe I should have put that the other way around. Metaphysical stories pointing to spiritual truths. You deal with something deep and profound and marvelous, and all of a sudden you are looking at space that's pointing to something very deep and eternal. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, as you were saying that, it came into my mind about you saying visits from other worlds. If we go back in history, you've got the Mayans, and I know there's a tribe in Central America now called the Mayans, and they're quite a, I don't like using the word perhaps primitive, but they are kind of an insular society where the Mayans that came that appeared from nowhere um, created a lot of wealth, a lot of ingenuity, all those thousands of years ago, and then just like in a puff of smoke, just disappeared off the planet again. And then in the same part of the world, you had the era of the Aztecs that brought incredible things to the planet, like underground central heating and quite advanced, and they disappeared off the planet. Now, what was all that about? Were they visits from a superior planet, superior life forms? Um, Obviously, these are things that we're not going to actually know the full answer to, but it certainly begs the question that we have been visited before.
Well, from my point of view, I think that you can see the footsteps of visitors everywhere if you're really looking, and you're not just completely biased.
Yeah.
And some people are, and some people want lots of evidence. That's perfectly acceptable. Just don't close your eyes to what's in front of you.
I,
Um,
I, I was just going to say, I remember when I hadn't long started on this spiritual journey that I'm on now, and I was trying to understand, and I went round like on a circuit with three others, um, doing, readings and that type of thing around the country. Um, but strangely enough, in down the Hagley Road in Birmingham, I was there, and the normal group of us were there, and the lady sitting opposite to me on her table, she was like the wife of the organizer, and this is before the general public were the doors are open to them, and she looked across at me, and I remember her name was Jill, and she said, "I've been looking at you, Alan, yes, and I've seen you sitting there in these gold and red robes, and you're a Mayan." So you were a Mayan in a previous life, and I looked at her. I said, "You what?" She says, "I've had this book with me now for the last couple of years, and I haven't even read it, and I don't know why I've got it." He says, "But I know why. We was meant to meet, and this is for you." And it was a book about the Mayans. It was really bizarre, really bizarre. And I still think about it now. I do find that rather a strange thing that happened, David.
oh, interesting stuff. I mean, Latin America is very interesting. It has
Yeah.
complete civilizations, the like of which we never really encountered in the West, and aren't similar to ours. They're quite dissimilar, and the way we behaved in that part of the world is an absolute disgrace. When Cortez, the Spaniard conquistador, is that the first? I mean, until recently, that always was the first attitude of Europeans. Let's attack it, then sell it. His
Yes.
meeting with Atahualpa really needs a lot more study and a lot more comment, because you're looking at two civilizations with very little in common encountering each other. Yeah, I mean, there's something magical literally in that part of the world. I mean, going back a minute to the UFO thing, right. So if nuts and bolts vehicles are floating about, which seems to be the case anyway, these UAPs as they're called nowadays, and there are little guys on them, and they land in your back garden. All right, there we are. That's interesting. Right, let's get down the pub. It doesn't answer anything. So there's a technology out there which is ahead of ours. Good show. There are these little guys. Great. I mean, what do they do at Christmas? What do they do all day? It's not an answer. It's people confusing religion with biology. I mean, that's biology, that's mechanics, that's engineering, and we can't do it, and we're not it. But that is all it is. It's not a spiritual answer. We got to be quite careful of that. I mean, my
I was going
trouble
to.
really.
Hello,
Yeah, you first, Alan.
hello, David.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
sorry.
first.
Now, what came in? Thank you. What I was going to say was that we're talking about beings from other planets. Do you see that their their creator is the same as our creator? What I mean by that is God as we perceive God, the creator of the total universe completely? Or do you think there could be other deities at work?
Well, I mean, that's the old question between is reality one thing or many things?
Yeah,
Either what Christians, Jews, and Muslims are talking about is true or it's not. It's that simple. If what we are talking about is true, there is one God, period. The end. There we are.
yeah,
Therefore, yes, I mean, it's different points of view. I've looked at those different points of view. You cannot hold to that position if you are a theist of any sort, if you're an Abrahamist of any sort, because that's different to that position. So yes, it would have to be. But my trouble with guys from other worlds isn't that it's not interesting. My trouble is that it's not more than it is. It's not what some people are saying it is. It's not a spiritual answer. It's interesting, but it's not a spiritual answer. Would they originate from the same source of all being? Of course they would. Either there's one source or there's not. If there are other sources of creation, I don't know what that would mean. I mean, we see a universe around us. It
yes,
seems to follow the same laws everywhere. How could there be a different universe at the same time? People are beginning to say there are, but they're not saying it's the same as here and now. They talk about other dimensions, okay, but that's not saying that what we're looking at and experiencing isn't the same thing everywhere we go. And I know there's a huge argument there. Can anybody say the laws of physics are the same across the universe as we know it? Of course you can't. But unless we work on that basis at the moment, we can't have things like the Hubble Space Telescope, we can't have flight, we can't have cars. All those
yeah,
things seem to work. So, you work on a premise, and also you work on the religious history of mankind, of human beings. Basically, apart from the polytheists, everybody's always said there was one source. Everything originates from one point of origin. And what the polytheists are talking about is actually different to us. I mean, the word God is probably the most complex word in human history at the minute.
yes.
When
Oh, yeah,
somebody starts throwing it around, I don't know what they mean. Right? You've got a term there. What is it you're actually trying to say? Um, so, I mean, if you take the word used by the local vicar, it will mean one thing, but the word used by the philosopher Spinoza, it will mean another thing. So, it depends where you're coming from, but people can't have it both ways. But they must understand the vocabulary they're dealing with. The word God for a polytheist and for a pagan, of which I'm very sympathetic to, is God with a small g, not a big G, not a capital G. So the divine source of things, that would be uppercase G, capital G. But what they were always talking about was lowercase entities with a great deal of power and religious authority, but not the ultimate source of things. If you look at cases in hand, you look at, say, ancient Greece with Apollo, the god of knowledge, and Aphrodite was actually the god of lust, not really love in the way we'd understand the word now. Um, because a lot of history, words have histories.
Yeah.
Words evolve as they go through history. So what the polytheists and pagans were talking about was different. I mean, the most intelligent pagans I met in Britain are perfectly aware of that. Excuse me, and they don't like using the word God with a capital G. They think it's inappropriate. Why? Because they say they've never encountered such a thing, which is interesting. Yes, the answer to that thought, my perspective on your thought is yes, there must be. So it's perfectly legitimate to ask what we've all got in common with the little guys on the things floating about, but it's still not an answer if these are just physical realities. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, you see, I suppose I was playing like devil's advocate really because uh, I can't I can't see how there cannot there can only be one source, can't there? There can only be one um, creation has created everything because things couldn't exist if there was more than one. It would be almost like would there be like an explosion, literally of two energies coming together, um, and just basically destroying everything. This is another thing, isn't it, about creation? What was there before creation? How human minds find it very difficult to the concept that there was nothing there, because you could argue that nothing is something. Right? I mean, it's like the daily news. Um, if if you put on your radio or TV and the announcer said, "We've got no news today," well, that in itself would be news, wouldn't it? It's like it's like it, it's like it's a full circle. There's no escaping from it. I don't know if you see it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go along with that. I mean, there is no news most days, which is why they make it up,
No, that's right.
um,
Yes.
and they distort things. Yeah, I mean, there was someone I used to read years back who I greatly admire, Herbert Spencer, who was one of the people. I don't know. I think he was some sort of humanist. Humanists nowadays are caricatures of what they were. This great towering intellect who was a follower of Darwin, and he actually sat thinking about these things for a long time, and said, "Look, it's not humanly possible to look at what is not creation. It's not even really possible to think about what is God. It doesn't mean they're not there. It doesn't mean they're not factors of parts of life, facts of life. It does mean human beings, excuse me, can't do that." And I think from coming from someone like him, that's extremely interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean we stop, and it doesn't mean we don't find these things inspiring. It just means we have to realise that we're human. We're not angels, and we need to conduct ourselves accordingly. And maybe one day we'll be slightly more than human. Who knows? But that day isn't here yet.
Now, okay, go to like the paranormal side of life, shall we say? Um, and the people who have seen, um, let's just use the term ghosts. I don't particularly like that term, but anyway, let's call it ghosts. People who have seen ghosts, who have seen them and know in there that they exist, and then you've got people who haven't seen ghosts and will not accept that they exist, and will always look for another answer to it. Now, a ghost of somebody that somebody has known uh, when they were alive as a human being on this planet is one thing. But then if you see a ghost of a creature that that isn't known on this planet, are you actually tapping in to another dimension that does exist somewhere else? Like from another planet. I don't know if I'm making myself clear in what I'm trying to say there.
Oh, it's very clear. I mean, I don't know how to respond to that one, to be honest, because I know you've seen these reptiles.
Yes.
Um, I never understand the ghost debate. Do ghosts exist? Yes. And that hasn't answered what they are.
That's right. It
You know,
hasn't.
so someone doesn't believe them, right? Okay, you've not had the experience, shut up. Lots of people have. Have they experienced encountering something? Yes, they have. What does it mean? The argument from my point of view just gets going at that point. It doesn't stop. All sorts of weird and wonderful things happen. That is when the debate starts. It's not when it stops. I'm into to Carl Jung, and I've always had a deep interest in psychology, psychiatry, which I think is one of the modern languages of religion. I think it's a disgrace that clergy, as they would have in the past, keep clear of these. They wouldn't have avoided them in the past. They'd have gone into these areas of learning because what religion is talking about is directly related to these things. So, do people encounter these things that are not human, that are something else? Yes, they do. What are they? And I think you're looking at a huge question mark again. So I'm not saying they're not there, but I don't know. Even if an Alan Cox comes along and says he's seen a lizard from another planet, I'm not
Yeah.
doubting that, but I don't know what that means in terms of the subconscious mind, in terms of, I because I don't have the correct apparatus. I don't think humanity does to begin to understand what that might mean. So yes, it's an interesting story. I don't mean it's only a story. It's an interesting account, and I've no doubt
Yes.
it happened. But I don't know what it means after that. You know, is it from inner space? Is it from outer space? What would it mean if it's from inner space? Which, from my point of view, is much more likely. But if it's from outer space, what does that mean? Is it from both, and what would that mean? So I couldn't answer that directly, but I think these things are very important to start talking about. Maybe that's the next step in evolution. We all start taking each other with a little more respect and start listening to each other a lot more deeply and start going, not wasting our times on destruction and warfare for the benefit of a few idle rich, but start debating about what our lives mean as ordinary human beings and exploring the universe around us. I think that's much more exciting and a wonderful thing to do to take the next step in our history. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah. No, I do agree with you there, David, because it when it comes down to it, um, people have tried to work out the meaning of life, um, and exactly what is the meaning of life. Okay, as you say, if you go down the religious way, that we were created in God's image. Uh, it's you could argue it's the most incredible experiment, trying to get people to realise the way that you should live and how you should behave to others and how you should look after the planet and look after people. Is that the sole purpose of it, or are we here to explore and to find out about the universe? But by finding out about the universe, is that really part of finding out about ourselves? It's so complicated, and there's that many different avenues that you can go down. Are we ever meant to find the so-called utopia, or is this just a flux journey that mankind has to take? At the moment, we seem to be on a journey of trying to self-destruct. Um, is you see another thought is if you if you take the universal energy, God, whatever word you want to use, um, is that energy, is that God in despair and thinks, I want to end it all this off and start afresh? So the destruction of the planet. I suppose some people might even think along those terms, David.
Well, again, those are complicated questions, and I think we're coming to an end. I don't think God's got much to do with it. I think Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and that mob have a great deal to do with it.
You're probably
Um,
right. And our
Maybe we
friend,
need to just look at a few home truths in front of it.
and our friend Donald Trump as well.
Oh, well, he's Boris Johnson over there, basically, isn't he? So,
I never get my head around the fact that he can be up in court that many times, has got that many charges against him, and even if he goes to prison, he can still run the country. Oh
this
dear
is why
me!
you have faith in America and I'm losing it.
It's, uh, I mean, if somebody made it up as a fictional program on TV or cinema, you'd say, "Oh, this is just unbelievable." Now, who thought this up? But it isn't. It's actually happening. Oh,
Well,
dear.
it'd be interesting if he becomes president.
As you say. Well, and then you got Joe Biden, who doesn't even know who he's talking about or what he's saying half the blooming time.
And that's a disgrace, though. That mental incompetent has his finger on the red button. I mean, that is a disgrace.
It's
You know,
unbelievable.
America, and I'll stop after this. It's got to realise its domestic politics are not the world. You know, there are people. I mean, I'm British. I'm not American. I don't like being run. Influenced by some old guy that they think suits their purposes over there. Sorry.
Well, my friends in America who I speak to, they're they're in despair over Joe Biden themselves. They are. So I don't know.
I
Anyway,
take back the phrase mental incompetent. That geriatric. This
yeah, yes. Well, believe it or not, we've virtually come to the end, David. You know, we've managed to get through there, managed to do it. Now, have I got my calculations correct? We're on next weekend again, aren't
we're
we?
on next weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right, folks. It's like there's 2 Sundays in a month now that we won't be on air, and if my internet has anything to go by, it might even be more than that. Dear me. Anyway, we've finally got through it, David.
Yeah,
So
another and back in the saddle, Alan. Back in the saddle.
yeah, I am glad to be. I've had an hiatus, and I'm back up and running. So thank you everybody for listening, and thank you, Dave Moriarty, for your invaluable comments. Do appreciate um, you listening in, and everybody else who's not in the chat room is listening in. So anyway, it's. I hope you all have a lovely Sunday. Thank you for joining me, David, as usual.
Always a pleasure, Alan.
Okay, so we'll talk soon. You take care.
Take care. Bye bye now.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Now. I'm going to try. This is the okay. Fun part is ending it. There we go.